Well, it's definitely not anything I aspired to do. But my journey started when I learned that one of my sons, who was 14 at the time, had been watching pornography. So I mentioned that my husband's a pastor. And at the time, I was a homeschool mom, and we were also planting a brand new church.
Wow.
And at the time, it just never occurred to me that our son would watch porn. So when I found out, I was completely devastated. I had all the feels. I was shocked and angry and hurt and sad and guilty and ashamed and mostly lonely. I really didn't know who to tell. It's not like I could turn to my best friend over coffee and be like, "Hey, my son's watching porn. How about yours?" That's not something we would do, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't go to my brand new congregation and confide that, "Hey, the pastor's son has a porn problem."
Yeah.
It just didn't feel right. And there is all that stigma, et cetera. So
you don't want to embarrass him either.
No, for sure.
yeah, exactly. And even when I turned to the internet for a place for personal help, I found none. And so I really suffered in silence. And so I was able to find help for him, but it was really more like, what about me? Because I'm also broken. And so when I started to help him and I began to research pornography and its effects, I learned how prevalent pornography is in today's world and how easily accessible it is and how many children are finding it. And so that's when this light bulb just kind of went off. I thought, well, if all these children are viewing pornography, then there's a bunch of parents out there who have children who are viewing pornography. So why aren't we talking about it? And so this was my thought and this was my prayer. And eventually God said, well, you go, girl, you talk about it. So after I, had a little back and forth with him, I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I started hopefulmom.net. And one of the main objectives there is to just give parents who learn that a child is watching porn a virtual hug, right? Because parents need to know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who can come alongside them and just say, hey, I've been there and I've lived to tell about it. And it's almost 6 years old now, Hopeful Mom. And over the years, the ministry has expanded and grown. And eventually that led to a book contract. And Sexpectations' objective really is to help parents and leaders and educators learn how to model healthy relationships and then pass that information along to the next generation. Because many of us didn't know, going into marriage and going into parenting, we didn't know what a healthy relationship really looked like because we weren't taught that. And so I think that's why we need books like this. Yeah. And I specifically in the context of this book, look at having a healthy relationships in the context of the sexualized culture that our children are growing up in today.
Yeah, because that's a great segue to the next question, but I do just want to say this is what I love about how the Lord works, and it makes me think of 2 Corinthians 1, where like when we, experience pain and difficulty, God comforts us, and in that it becomes a ministry for us to help other people. So that's super cool to hear, and we definitely make sure that your book and your website are in the show notes as well.
And I just want to affirm too what you're doing because of how many parents are in that exact same position. And I don't have the stat in front of me and won't make one up on the spot. But what I do know is consistently when research is done with parents and teens, and they ask the questions like, do your kids ever view pornography? And the parents who say no is always way, way higher than the kids who say no. And so there's in every research this gap where there are a lot more kids who are regularly viewing porn, whether inadvertently or intentionally, than any parent believes. And I think part of that is our nature as parents of we raise our kids, we're with them all the time, we think we know what they do and where they go and who they're with, and we feel that sense of maybe even protectiveness. Well, I would know if my kid was doing this. And the reality is very often we don't. And so we need others that have gone before us that can help understand how those conversations happen. What might we do to create the environment in our home? I mean, all those things many parents just haven't thought about because they get stuck in that mindset of, oh, well, not my kids. And yet statistically, there's a good chance that it is your kids. You just haven't found out yet. And when you do, I bet a lot of parents felt just like you do, Barb, with all the feels and what's wrong with me and how did I miss this? And to have a resource like yours is so, so